The grand hall of the Lancaster mansion in the heart of Bel-Air buzzed with scandalous laughter, champagne glasses, and arrogant glances. The event was one of the most anticipated of the year. The traditional winter gala hosted by magnate Gregory Lancaster, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in California. At the top of the majestic marble staircase, every gaze turned to a figure no one expected to see there. A black woman, slender, elegant, wearing a stunning dress that looked like it came straight out of a Vogue editorial. The silence that took over the room was quickly replaced by nervous laughter, scornful looks, and venomous whispers. "Oh my God, is that the cleaning lady?" whispered Evelyn Whitmore, the wife of a congressman, holding back laughter as she squeezed her friend's arm. Gregory raised his crystal glass, holding it with fingers adorned with white gold and sapphire rings. "Ladies and gentlemen, look who decided to show up. Our dear Naomi Carter." The malice in his voice was evident, as if every word were a blade. Naomi, 34, had worked at the Lancaster mansion for the past 2 years. Always invisible, always ignored, cleaning up the excesses of the elite while swallowing the glances that pierced through her as if she were part of the furniture. The invitation had arrived 3 days earlier, delivered personally by Gregory, accompanied by a smile dripping with cruelty. Saturday, winter gala. Dress code? Maximum elegance. "You have something like that, right, Naomi?" he asked in front of a group of friends who burst into laughter. It was a trap. Everyone knew it. A carefully planned humiliation show. Gregory had bet with his wife, Lorraine, and some business partners that Naomi would never dare to show up. And if she did, she would be the punchline of the night. $100,000 says she won't come," Gregory said with that predator's smile. "And if she does, she'll be our entertainment." Lorraine crossed her arms, laughing. "Oh, Gregory, you're terrible. Poor thing. If she shows up, she'll run away within 15 minutes. What Gregory didn't know was that Naomi wasn't who he thought she was. Some winds don't knock you down. They teach you how to fly. As she slowly descended the steps, under eyes oscillating between contempt and disbelief, Naomi carried something beyond elegance. She carried secrets capable of transforming that night, designed to be her humiliation, into the biggest scandal the Bel-Air elite had ever witnessed. As Naomi crossed the hall, the stairs tightened around her like judgmental spotlights. Every step echoed like thunder on the marble floor. Her dress, a vibrant sapphire blue with an impeccable cut, seemed even more provocative, not for its sensuality, but because it adorned the body of someone who, according to that elite, should never have belonged in that space. The group of socialites gathered near the drinks table stared wide-eyed. She really had the nerve to come," whispered Evelyn, clutching her diamond necklace as if it could protect her from second-hand embarrassment. "Where did she get that dress? Rented it? Borrowed it?" mocked Vivian Hastings, daughter of a billionaire investor, trying to disguise her own insecurity with sarcasm. But what none of them knew was that Naomi didn't need to rent or borrow anything. She simply opened a box that had been locked away for years, a box that held far more than fabric and thread. It held her story, her truth, and everything Gregory Lancaster had sworn no one would ever discover. Gregory approached, flanked by 3 of his business partners, all laughing, convinced they had absolute control of the situation. "Naomi, what a surprise, or rather, what a show," he said, with that tone of fake courtesy dripping with venom. "I must admit, I didn't think you'd have the nerve. But after all, when someone like you receives an invitation like this, it's only natural to grab the golden opportunity, isn't it?" Naomi lifted her chin, her gaze serene, cold, sharp as glass. "An opportunity like this, Gregory? Go ahead, finish your sentence. What exactly do you mean by someone like me?" For a second, just one, subtle, Gregory hesitated. That tone of voice, that posture, they didn't match the submissive woman he was used to ignoring while barking orders. But soon his arrogance returned. "Oh, Naomi. You know, no need to play clever. People who, let's say, aren't usually seen in places like this." Naomi smiled, but it wasn't a sweet smile. It was calm, dangerous, unsettling. Several people who had been laughing moments ago suddenly fell silent, without even knowing why. It was as if, instinctively, they sensed something was about to happen. Intimidated? Naomi repeated, savoring each syllable. Gregory. No, darling. I am exactly where I've always belonged. The silence that followed weighed heavier than the gilded walls of that hall, and at that moment the tides began to turn. Though no one there had realized it yet, Gregory tried to laugh, a nervous, forced laugh, nothing like before. Well, I hope you enjoy the night. After all, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. He adjusted his blazer, glancing around, trying to find support in his friend's eyes. But for the first time, he realized that some no longer shared the same amusement. There was something about Naomi's presence that was unsettling everyone. Oh, don't worry, Gregory, Naomi replied, shooting him a look that seemed to pierce straight through him. It's going to be a night unforgettable for all of us. She walked through the hall as if she were the true owner of that place. Heads turned, whispers grew louder, and some laughs, once filled with scorn, now gave way to expressions of discomfort, anticipation, and pure fear of the unknown. Who is she? Really? Whispered one of the partners, Dennis Kramer, frowning as he asked another investor. Naomi stopped in front of the main table, where the hosts usually toasted with their most important guests. She picked up a crystal glass and slowly tapped it with a spoon, producing a metallic sound that sliced through the murmuring like a razor. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice clear, precise, elegant. Before the night goes any further, Gregory would like to officially introduce me to all of you. She looked straight into his eyes, wearing that calm smile that was now starting to terrify him. Isn't that right, Gregory? Gregory, caught completely off guard, tried to pull himself together. Yes, of course. Friends, this is Naomi Carter, our dedicated staff member. He forced a smile, but his voice faltered. She takes care of the mansion's upkeep. Some chuckled, others simply exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing they were witnessing something they probably shouldn't. But Naomi didn't avert her gaze for a single second. She raised her glass, looked around at the guests, and added, with a serenity that now felt threatening, "It's curious how life turns, and how certain truths have the nasty habit of showing up precisely at the right moment." Gregory froze. That sentence wasn't random. It had the tone of a threat. And for the first time that night, a thought struck his mind like lightning. She knows. My God, she knows. In that moment, the hall was no longer divided between rich and poor, guests and staff. It was now divided between those who understood that something very serious was about to happen, and those who still thought this was just another cruel joke. Gregory cleared his throat, uncomfortable. He tried to regain control of the situation, but the sense of security that once surrounded him seemed to have evaporated. Well, friends, let's toast. To diversity, to inclusion, he said, forcing a smile no one believed. Funny you say that, Gregory, Naomi interrupted, her voice now carrying a firmness that made even the waiters freeze in the middle of the hall. You know, looking around at everyone here, I wonder how many truly know who I am. The hall sank into an uncomfortable silence. Evelyn and Vivian, who had been mocking her before, now clutched their necklaces and glasses as if they wished they could disappear. Gregory tried to laugh. Oh, Naomi, everyone knows who you are. Our dear staff member. Naomi took 2 steps forward, her presence rising like a wave about to crush everything. Yes, staff, cleaning lady, invisible, until today. She paused, took a deep breath, and looked directly at Gregory. But what you, and many others here, conveniently forgot, is that I didn't get here by accident. She opened her handbag and slowly pulled out a small, shining object that made several guests lean in to see. It was a ring, not just any ring, but a family heirloom, old, with a crest engraved in gold and a ruby stone that seemed to capture every light in the hall. This ring, she said, holding it up, belonged to Charles Lancaster, my grandfather. The shock was immediate. A collective gasp surged through the hall like electricity. Gregory stood frozen. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Lorraine brought her hand to her mouth, pale. "You're insane!" Gregory burst out, but his voice sounded more like desperation than outrage. This is a fake, a cheap forgery." Naomi didn't flinch an inch. "A forgery?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Funny you say that, Gregory, considering you've spent the last 20 years forging the truth." Several guests began recording with their phones, realizing they were witnessing not just any scandal, but something that would likely be on the front pages the next day. "You want me to prove it?" Naomi continued, her voice now so cold it seemed to freeze the entire room. "Because if you do, I can start. Right now." Gregory tried to speak, tried to deny it, tried to control the situation like he always did. But for the first time in his life, he realized he was cornered. Not by security, not by allies, but by the truth. And that night, the truth had a name, a last name, and was wearing a sapphire blue dress. Gregory took a step back, as if that tiny ring carried the weight of a bomb about to explode. His face, once red with arrogance, was now pale. This proves nothing," he tried to say, but his voice sounded weak, hollow, as if even he didn't believe his own words. Naomi stood still, her gaze locked onto him. "Oh, Gregory, you want proof? Then let me help you." She subtly gestured toward someone near the entrance. The doors swung open, and 3 people walked down the central carpet, stopping right in the middle of the hall under the stunned gazes of the gathered elite. The first was Sarah Reynolds, one of the most feared investigative journalists in Los Angeles, known for bringing down senators, judges, and tycoons. Beside her stood Daniel Kim, one of the top attorneys in the state specializing in inheritance law and corporate fraud. But the third made Gregory stagger, as if he'd been struck by an invisible punch. "Dr. Edward Collins," Lorraine murmured, her trembling hand covering her lips. Everyone in the city knew that name. The Lancaster family's personal physician, the one who had cared for the patriarch, Charles, until his final days. "Doctor." Collins walked to the center, took a deep breath, and with a heavy yet firm voice announced, "For over 20 years, I carried a burden that consumed me every single day. I was coerced, threatened, and bribed to keep the truth about Charles Lancaster's death a secret." The hall erupted into murmurs, muffled gasps, and expressions of absolute shock. Gregory stood frozen. Don't you dare," he tried, but Dr. Collins cut him off. "Silence, Gregory." His voice sliced through the air like a blade. "Did you really think I didn't record all your threats? All your orders to keep my mouth shut? You've spent your entire life underestimating everyone, including your own sister." "Your what?" Several guests practically shouted in unison, looking back and forth between Gregory and Naomi in pure disbelief. Naomi took a deep breath, staring firmly at everyone in the room. "Yes, sister. I am the daughter of Charles Lancaster." The daughter Gregory pretended didn't exist, the one he tried to erase from history, as if I were a mistake, an accident, a shame. The sound of phones recording, notifications buzzing, and reporters already gathering outside was starting to turn that gala night into the biggest social scandal Bel-Air, and probably the entire state of California, had ever witnessed. And the worst hadn't even started yet. Gregory's face had lost every bit of color. His hands clenched, his eyes wide, darting around as if searching for an escape, a way out, a hole in the ground. But there was none. No doors, no allies, no excuses. This is a lie," he shouted, his voice cracking halfway through the sentence. You're conspiring against me." Naomi didn't even blink. She simply shook her head slowly, with that calm, razor-sharp smile that now felt like the blade of a guillotine about to fall. "Gregory, you've spent your whole life believing you were above the truth, above consequences. But you know what's funny?" She paused, locking eyes with him. The truth always wins, sooner or later. Daniel Kim opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a series of documents, placing them on the main table for everyone to see. Here are copies of the original will of Charles Lancaster, in which he recognizes Naomi Carter as his legitimate daughter and direct beneficiary of 50% of the entire Lancaster family estate. More murmurs, more shock, more horror. Lorraine nearly fainted. Evelyn clutched Vivian's arm as if she were about to collapse. "Lies!" Gregory shouted, but even he no longer seemed to believe his own words. Sarah Reynolds, holding her recorder, stepped in with that surgical coldness that had destroyed so many reputations. "Gregory, do you confirm or deny that, days before your father's death, there were suspicious alterations made to the registered will, changes done without Naomi's presence and under questionable circumstances?" Gregory tried to open his mouth, but no sound came out. He was just breathing heavily, sweating, his collar now choking him more than ever. "Doctor." Collins took a deep breath, facing everyone. Mr. Lancaster knew about Naomi. He cared for her, discreetly, and when he discovered that Gregory had been embezzling money from the family company, he not only decided to officially include her in the will, but also to remove Gregory from the CEO position. It was exactly during that time that Charles's health problems began. The entire hall froze. Are you suggesting?" Someone whispered, unable to finish the sentence. "I'm not suggesting anything," Dr. Collins replied, pulling a medical report from an envelope. "Here are the toxicology results I recently conducted on the remains of Charles Lancaster. Arsenic, cumulative dosing, poisoning, over the course of several months." The shock was immediate. Several guests physically stepped back, as if Gregory were radioactive. Lorraine, her hands trembling, whispered, "My God, what did you do?" And Gregory, for the first time in his life, was completely shattered. He took 2 steps back, nearly tripping over his own fear. His face was unrecognizable, a mixture of panic, disbelief, and sheer desperation. This is a lie. This is a conspiracy. To destroy me," he screamed, but his voice held no authority anymore. Naomi crossed her arms, looking at him like someone watching a house of cards collapse. "You know, Gregory, when you spent 2 years watching me clean this hall, maybe you forgot one little detail. Those who clean, they see. They see everything, they hear everything, and they learn." Sarah Reynolds stepped forward with a tablet in hand. "Would you like to hear this, Gregory?" she asked, pressing play. Suddenly, the entire hall filled with his own recorded voice. "If you open your mouth, Dr. Collins, I swear your medical license disappears the next day. And that girl and her mother, they can fend for themselves. Not my problem. Let them handle their lives because I handle mine. And if anyone finds out what I did to that old man, I'll drag you down with me." The shock was absolute. Half the guests covered their mouths. The other half started recording. No, this is manipulated. This is deep fake. This proves nothing." Gregory was nearly screaming now, but his voice sounded more like a desperate plea than a threat. Daniel Kim stepped forward, placing more documents on the table. "Here are the bank records of transfers made by Mr. Gregory Lancaster to Dr. Collins, exactly 3 days after Charles Lancaster's death. The amount, $200,000. Description, special medical consultancy." And there are others, many others. Gregory began to tremble. He was sweating so much that his hair was plastered to his forehead. He tried to look at Lorraine, but she had stepped away, staring at him with a mixture of disgust and horror. "Lorraine, please, you believe me?" he stammered, taking a step toward his wife. "No," she replied with a coldness that cut deeper than any knife. You're a monster." The sound of sirens began echoing from outside. Several guests rushed to the balcony to see. Red and blue lights flashed, reflecting off the mansion's marble walls. Sarah smiled, almost satisfied. "I think your night is just getting started, Gregory." And in that moment, he realized Everything he had built over decades was about to collapse in a matter of minutes. The sound of the sirens grew louder. The red and blue lights reflected off the crystal chandelier, painting the hall in shades of scandal, shame, and ruin. Multiple police cars surrounded the mansion. Journalists, cameras, and flashes crowded outside like vultures waiting for the carcass of an empire collapsing before everyone's eyes. Gregory looked around like a cornered animal. He tried to run, to find a side exit, but two officers from the Los Angeles Police Department entered the hall immediately, walking with firm, determined steps, ignoring the discomfort of the elite guests. "Gregory Lancaster," announced the first officer, pulling out the handcuffs. "You are under arrest for the crimes of first-degree murder, corporate fraud, document forgery, inheritance concealment, bribery, and obstruction of justice." The sound of the metallic click of the handcuffs echoed louder than any music that had ever played in that hall. "This is outrageous," Gregory shouted, struggling against the officers. "Do you know who I am? I'm Gregory Lancaster. I own this place." "Used to," Naomi replied, staring at him with the serenity of someone who knew that justice was finally being served. "You used to." Lorraine, pale, arms crossed, stepped even further away, as if the man she had lived with for 2 decades was now a stranger. Or worse, a monster. The guests watched in absolute silence. Evelyn and Vivian, who once laughed at the cleaning lady, were now huddled in a corner, praying that no camera would catch them associated with this disaster. As Gregory was escorted outside, Naomi walked toward the balcony. Outside, more than 20 reporters, cameramen, and photographers were in a frenzy. The moment she stepped out, a storm of flashes erupted. "Miss Carter, is it true you're the heir to the Lancaster fortune? How did you uncover the fraud? Did Mr. Gregory poison his own father? How does it feel to bring down one of Bel-Air's biggest empires?" Naomi took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and responded, her voice clear, strong, and cutting through the gates of the elite to echo far beyond. "This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. It's about proving that dignity has no price. It can't be bought, inherited, or stolen. And sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one you chose to ignore." And behind her, as the officers led Gregory away in handcuffs, the empire he had built on lies and greed began to crumble, brick by brick. 6 months passed since the night that stopped Bel-Air and shook the foundations of California's high society. Gregory Lancaster was sentenced to 25 years in prison without parole for the crimes of murder, fraud, asset concealment, bribery, and money laundering. His empire was dismantled, his assets auctioned off, and his accounts frozen. But ironically, what seemed like the end was, in fact, a new beginning. Naomi Carter Lancaster now held the position of CEO of Lancaster Holdings, but not in the way Gregory had run it. The walls of the old office, once covered in fake certificates, framed photos of dinners with politicians, and vanity trophies, were now adorned with photos of the employees themselves. Workers who, for decades, had been invisible were now recognized. The board of directors was completely restructured. Half of the new leadership came from within, people who had started as drivers, assistants, secretaries, and even janitorial staff. People who never imagined holding executive positions, but whom Naomi knew carried talent, discipline, and dignity. The profits skyrocketed, productivity higher than ever. All because, for the first time, someone decided that respecting people was worth more than exploiting them. Lorraine, she filed for divorce immediately after the arrest. She sold everything she could, moved to another state with her children, and before leaving, she went to see Naomi. Standing at the doorway of Gregory's former office, Lorraine appeared with her head down. "You could have completely destroyed our family," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "But you chose to protect my children. I will never forget that." Naomi took a deep breath, looked at her, and replied with the same serenity of someone who had won a war without ever getting her hands dirty. "Children don't pay for the sins of their parents. They deserve the chance to be better than he ever was." Dr. Edward Collins, once consumed by guilt and silence, now worked as the company's director of wellness, leading a program that provided free medical care to all employees. "You've taught me that it's never too late to reclaim our dignity," he said during an internal meeting. And as for the socialites who once mocked her, of course they tried to reconnect. Evelyn, Vivian, and many others sent flowers, messages, dinner invitations. Naomi simply responded politely but kept her distance. "You laughed at me when you thought I had no value. Now that you know the balance in my bank account, you want my friendship. That tells me everything I need to know." And while the city was still buzzing about the scandal, Naomi was already focused on the future. Because her greatest victory was never about destroying Gregory. It was about transforming what was once built on exploitation into a symbol of dignity and opportunity. Months later, Naomi Carter Lancaster sat in the very same office where, years ago, she used to scrub the floors, invisible to everyone there. Now, that room was the center of an empire rebuilt not on arrogance, but on justice, dignity, and respect. On the main wall, a new phrase engraved in stainless steel reflected the philosophy of the company's new era. "Power isn't about who stands at the top. It's about how many people you lift with you." That morning, her assistant Amanda, who once worked as a cleaner in the very same company, walked in with a bright smile. "Naomi, the Forbes team is here for the interview." Naomi smiled. The same Forbes that once put faces like Gregory's on its covers now wanted to understand how a cleaning lady transformed one of California's largest companies into a global reference for ethical leadership and social responsibility. She took a deep breath. "Let's do this." The interview went on, and at the end, the journalist asked, "Some people on social media say that all of this was revenge. What do you say about that?" Naomi held his gaze for a moment with the look she had mastered, firm, serene, and unbreakable. "Revenge would have been doing to him what he did to me. Justice is making sure he pays for his own crimes and ensuring that no one else has to suffer what I went through. There's a huge difference between revenge and justice." The journalist then asked the final question. "If you could give one piece of advice to anyone who feels humiliated, underestimated, or ignored right now, what would it be?" Naomi looked out the window. In the company garden, where there hadn't even been a bench before, there was now a recreation area, proper dining spaces, and a free daycare for employees' children. People who, like her, just needed a chance to show who they truly were. She smiled, locked eyes with the reporter, and replied, "The best response to those who humiliate you isn't to destroy them. It's to build something so big, so powerful, so beautiful, that the pain becomes nothing more than the first chapter of a victory story. They define you by who you are when you're on the ground, but it's you who decides whether you stay there." That night, Naomi went home, but not to the small apartment where she once nurtured her dreams of justice. She returned to a house filled with love, where 2 adopted children, who, like her, had once been forgotten by the world, now had a home, a future, and an example. And as she helped the girls with their homework, she looked up at the sky and smiled, because her greatest victory was never about taking Gregory down. It was about proving to the whole world that dignity cannot be bought, it cannot be inherited, and it cannot be stolen. It's built every single day.